All right, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining into our webinar today. Real quick, my name is Dan Hawkins, and I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing here at ThingTech. The focus of today's webinar is really a review of FTA's final rule for transit asset management, who this affects, what it takes to comply, timeline for all organizations to be compliant, and how other organizations are solving these challenges through the use of technology. Just real quick, I want to introduce today's presenter, Tim Quinn, who's our founder and CEO of ThingTech. Tim has over 20 years of experience in building and deploying intelligent transportation solutions and geospatial technologies for the fleet and asset management space. So he's going to really be taking us through an overview of the TAM program, again, who that affects, what it takes to comply, timelines, as well as how other organizations are leveraging technology like ThingTech to become compliant. Just a bit of housekeeping before we do get started. All your lines are currently muted, but we do want this to be an interactive session, so if you do have questions, definitely use the hand raise tool in GoToWebinar, or feel free to type your question in chat. We'll be monitoring that throughout, so we'll definitely leave some time or address those questions as they come up if they're applicable. The second thing is that this session is being recorded today. If you don't have the chance to stick around through the entire thing, we'll be distributing a recording after the fact. And for those folks who are unable to join us, we'll be distributing this out to the entire group of attendees afterwards. Also, at the end of the meeting, we are offering some special incentives to all of our attendees today, so please stick around. You'll definitely want to take advantage of some of those offers, so stick around for the end, and we'll talk through those as we get to that. So without further ado, Tim, take it away.
Got it. Thank you, Dan. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today for this session. We have about an hour of an action-packed event. We're going to focus really on some of the requirements, of course. Many of you are beginning to either in the process of becoming compliant or definitely researching what it takes to become compliant and what tools to potentially use for your decision support system. We're going to be very hands-on today. We're going to go through a few slides, kind of frame the problem, frame the approach, but then we really want to get in and demonstrate how technology is being leveraged to really serve as a data-driven decision support tool, which we think is the aim of this approach. Before we get started, though, just put my marketing hat on. We are an Atlanta-based software company. We provide products and tools for asset intelligence. Our tools give insights and visibility on how things, quote-unquote things, are performing, how they're being utilized, and how a workforce is being utilized to improve those. We focus on, the technology we focus on is obviously to improve operations. We want to create what we call asset intelligence, and we do that in real time for fleets, facilities, equipment, sensors, and other organizations to really create smarter and more connected enterprises. Obviously, one of the things that we like to talk about is the return on investment. We'll talk about our architecture and our cloud-based offering that makes the return on investment for these systems very, very fast. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we really just want to create and improve customer service by connecting customers more effectively. We are an Internet of Things or IoT company that really main goal is to create connected customers and experiences in real time. To the right are some of our customers that we've deployed our technologies to. We are built on an award-winning platform, what we call ThingX Connect, which is our platform for real-time asset intelligence. To get started, so that's the marketing piece, let's talk about the background. Obviously, most of you have a pretty good understanding of the background of TAM, and started out MAP 21, of course, became FAST, and really established the final rule of establishing a system to monitor and manage public transport assets, improve safety, increase reliability and performance, and to establish performance measures. We're going to speak a lot today about asset classes and how we define asset classes. We're going to discuss a little bit about performance measures, useful life benchmarks, and performance targets, and how those are integrated into a best practice asset management approach. And then we'll also talk about state of good repair, which is a big focus, obviously. The last final rule, the state of good repair is beginning defined as a condition which the capital asset is able to operate at a full level of performance. So it's a little bit more subjective than it was initially defined. Now, not to make anybody put undue pressure on anyone, obviously this is a timeline of the deployment of the TAM rule. So obviously we're now approaching October 1st, 2017, where state DOTs established statewide targets. 4 months after the fiscal year in 2018, providers are going to submit asset inventory module, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how we support two of the requirements, which is the asset inventory module workbook, as well as NTD performance targets reporting, where we generate both those documents natively out of our system to be able to submit up to FTA. October 1st, 2018, TAM plans are completed. And then really 2019, the full law is really being rolled out. So obviously the timeline is very important, but also we're going to discuss applicability. Just as a reminder for those, most of you guys probably know or understand this, there's really two tiers, Tier 1 and Tier 2. Both of those tiers have slightly different reporting requirements. Obviously, Tier 1 has a little more stringent reporting and implementation requirements than Tier 2. Both tiers have to do a base level inventory, have to do a condition assessment, implement some sort of decision support tool, whether it's a tool like our product, or whether it's Microsoft Excel, and also define your investment prioritization. One of the things that we mention from a technology, from an architecture perspective, which is really, really important, is the ability to have a hierarchical approach to your data. So when I say that, if we have a regional or a statewide, say, group plan for Tier 2, or even a regional transit plan, we want to be able to make sure that we can define the parent account, and all the other organizations or agencies or grantees below them would roll up to this parent. So if this was an MPO or if this was a state DOT, we may see the rural transit providers below, or the suburban providers and the urban providers below, that roll up to the parent account. These are children account. So ultimately what that allows us to do is create one coordinated asset management database where we can cut and dice the data across multiple levels, multiple agencies, and drill down to details where needed. Performance management is going to be very big. We're going to discuss how we define asset classes in our system, but then also associate performance measures with those asset classes. That's going to be very, very important. And between defining your asset classes, which FTA has actually defined for us, which we can use, defining your useful life benchmarks for each asset class, and your performance targets are really going to be the foundation of your NTD reporting and your record keeping. So the new performance measures that have been released in the latest rule, obviously rolling stock is an asset class. It's age-based, and that's simply the performance measure, percentage of revenue vehicles within an asset class that have met or exceeded the ULB, or the useful life benchmark. Facilities are a function of condition, using what's called the TERM model, which we'll talk about that as well. Our system completely supports the Transit Economic Requirements model, and that's simply a grade between 5 and 1, 5 being excellent or brand new, 1 being poor, and actually 150% past useful life. The value will never, ever fall below a 1. Infrastructure in terms of performance is for those that operate a fixed guideway system, it's percentage of guideway directional route miles with performance restrictions by class. Effectively, things such as if the design criteria of a rail facility is 50 miles per hour, but there's a performance restriction on that facility that you can only go 25 miles per hour. the directional routes need to be measured based on that. Okay, and equipment's age as well. So the latest ruling has simplified, I believe, the performance measure requirements and provided much more insight. We've modeled this in our system to be able to generate the data exactly how FTA needs it. When you talk about common considerations, how do you integrate all your assets and inventorying using the asset classification model that we've just discussed? How do you assess the condition of your assets or your facilities? How do you track and assign grant and financial data to your assets? That's part of the NTD reporting requirement, is where the asset's funded or how did it get funded is one of the requirements. How do you assign any capital or operating expenses to your assets via, say, a work order, service request? What are you using to inspect your assets? Are you using a mobile app to go out in the field to capture data about your assets, whether it's a facility, whether it's a bus stop or station? But there's new tools available that can really automate that process or assist in that process in terms of how you collect data in the field with, say, a tablet or mobile app. How you can comply with your NTD reporting requirements. Really, how can technology assist in developing and maintaining your TAM plan? So your condition, your inventory, number one, your condition of that inventory, your asset classes, your performance measures, your performance targets, your useful life benchmarks, all that data goes into your TAM plan. Then on an annual basis, there's a narrative of how your assets have changed from the previous year in terms of condition and utilization. Finally, how can you use your TAM system for capital planning, project prioritization, and replacement? We'll demonstrate some capital planning replacement tools that we provide to assist in determining how many dollars you need over the next 5, 10, 15 years to replace your high priority assets or those assets that are determined to be investment priorities. So these tools will be discussed, and we'll demonstrate these as we move forward. When we talk about our product, our ThingX or ThinkTech Enterprise Transit Asset Management Solution, it's really designed to be very scalable and extensible. It can be very, very simple, and it can scale all the way up to do very, very complex organizations that have mature asset management programs already in place. So when we talk about just simply managing the assets, the inventory, the class, and the demographic or the basic data about the asset is really the beginning of developing your asset management program. You can then start to integrate other data or extend the system for your maintenance and your work order optimization. Work orders being preventive maintenance, corrective maintenance, safety, and inspections as well. And then integrate parts, inventory, and materials into your system as well if you needed to. And then really leverage asset analytics, which is really, really the big piece of this. This asset analytics is really the decision support functionality that really is going to help you drive many of the decisions you make as it relates to funding and replacement of your assets, as well as project prioritization. For those of you that want to integrate other data, such as fueling systems, such as Fuel Master or fuel cards, we connect to those systems in real time and bring that data in. So we start getting fueling information. We also manage your tires. We have what we call a cost center and grants management component where we manage the grant, how much the activity line items of that grant, and then we can start allocating those costs to assets or cost centers very effectively and very easily. But at a minimum, we simply need to know where the asset, how the asset was purchased, and it wasn't purchased from a state or federal grant, is the minimum requirement for your NTD reporting. Incidents and accidents are also very important. We also can extend the solution to real time, which we'll talk about in a later webinar. The image above is just simply showing the asset management inventory, the condition, and also showing the mobile apps. Everything we're going to demonstrate today is accessible via our mobile app, whether it's a smartphone or whether it's a tablet. So anything I can do on my console or my desktop, I can easily do on my phone or tablet. The image to the bottom, this is what we call our paperless shop app, which really allows you to move your work orders within the shop, which is in your maintenance shop, off of paper and onto, say, a kiosk or a very ruggedized tablet if your maintenance workers really wanted to automate that process and move away from paper. You sign into the work order, we capture the time, we capture the work order, all the line items, all the costs. It's very, very simple. Users simply learn 3 or 4 buttons, and that solves or really automates that process almost completely. But it's very, very important because we do start capturing time information, labor information as relates to the asset, so we can capture the total cost of ownership of the asset. Our system is completely subscription and cloud-based, so you simply need a browser to access the system. It's very easy to set up. There's an automated data import wizard that you just import your wizard in by asset class or category. Very simple. At the end of the day, it was designed to meet, the intent of it is to meet the 100% of the US DOT's FAST requirements, or MAP 21 requirements, and the FTA, NTD, and reporting requirements. All the roles and user roles are defined, and permissions are set up at a user level, so based on who and what you are, you see certain things within the application. And the hierarchy of the application has been designed so that multiple agencies can live in one database and roll up to the parent organization, which we think is a really, really big deal, especially as it relates to states or regions that are pushing forward on a Tier 2 plan or group plan. And it's very, very scalable to meet additional future requirements and needs. So when we look at the application, we're simply going to see, when we click on an asset, drill down to an asset, we'll see all the basic information of the asset, all the financial information, the vehicle information, what group it belongs to, purchase information, odometer-related information. But at the end of the day, what we're trying to create is one single place to go to understand any and everything about your assets. Okay, whether that's a facility, whether that's a vehicle, whether it's a piece of equipment, piece of infrastructure, or other types of asset classes. It's very scalable. We define things called maintenance schedules. We have concepts of work orders that can be integrated. Meters are simply things that allow us to define the maintenance schedule of the application and automate that process. Every 5,000 miles I need to do this, I need to change oil, or every 365 days I need to check my, I need to certify or inspect my HVAC systems or my escalators or my elevators, a lot of the state required processes. So all this data is maintained and managed. We can easily attach any note, any video, any picture, any documents to the asset as well. We can put workflows, alerts, approval processes on any asset. So if we want to know anytime an asset goes out of service, so the status is in service, that goes out of service, let this group of people know about it. So it's a way to really coordinate and communicate the status of the assets and how you're maintaining these assets very, very easily. Now, what we also want to do is also extend the life cycle of these assets. So now we're just looking at a little bit more detailed data of the asset. We're just continuing to drill down of what are my tires, what's the condition of my tires, what are my maintenance schedules, do I have any work orders associated with this asset, and what's the status of those? This one's completed, this one's not started. What's my meters in terms of how often do I need to do something? What's my fuel transactions? How much fuel or how much liquids have I put into this vehicle? And is there something that I should be aware of? This is poor, so saying that this may be an area where we're having issues with fuel or putting too much fuel into a vehicle if that's possible. Any warranties, any incidents or accidents, any notes and attachments. So it's one single place to go to get all the data that you need about your asset, as well as is your maintenance or inspections of these assets and facilities on schedule. So you can see this is on schedule. The data analytics, or the asset, what we like to call asset analytics, is very, very deep and very comprehensive. So we have standard reports that can be modified. We have a very intuitive ad hoc wizard as well as dashboard builder. You can schedule and subscribe to all the reports. We do support all the NTD required reports and all the AIM module data requirements. We provide the capital planning replacement tools, and we can access this data anywhere as long as we have a connection, internet connection or a cellular connection via mobile apps, whether your smartphone or a tablet. So very, very easy to access and very, very robust. Now, if we if we start to look at the application, or an application, I'll start to pull this up. What we can now see is simply the user interface for this particular organization. We can easily create new objects or assets by simply create new. I can click on an asset. Now, what I want to discuss here is, before we discuss the asset management and the maintenance, what's a very, very important piece is, again, that concept of a hierarchy. So let's look at what a hierarchy would be in real life. So if we look at, say, this is the parent account. If I look at the hierarchy of this account, what we're going to see is this is the parent. All of these organizations below are partners, but they also own and operate assets, and they also utilize the system to maintain those assets. But we can see that we have all this data rolls up to this parent, and we can drill down to each of these agencies to see their assets, how they're behaving. But we can also report and analyze these, and also compare them across regions and across performance measures and performance standards. These guys roll up to this organization. So any people in this organization can see below them, but folks below in the child hierarchy cannot look and see things above them. It's a very, very important concept, especially as it relates to statewide or regional MPO, regional asset management programs. Now, if we go back and now start looking at a home screen, this is simply a place to get to things very, very easily. We can have any tasks that need to be completed. So I can assign tasks, inspection tasks, service tasks, work order tasks to users. Those tasks would be displayed here. If I had any approvals or work orders to approve, or inspections to approve, or issues that I need to approve via workflow approval process, those approvals would be managed here as well in terms of items to approve. Now, at the end of the day, what we really want to be able to do is capture our inventory. So this is our inventory by fleet and make, our condition, and our utilization. So this is just a dashboard we can get to very, very quickly. If we want to start now looking at the details of an asset, I can easily search for any asset. If I just have no idea when it comes up. But here's the people, here's the work orders, here's an expense that has that number in it. So it's very, very quick to find information, very, very quick to access the data. In this case, we have our asset object. These are all my vehicles that are owned and operated. So I can easily go and find any of my facilities in my fixed guideway, any stations, any systems, any information very, very quickly. So if I just want to look at my vehicles and click go, these are all my vehicles. This is the name, make, model, year, license plate, serial number, what agency it belongs to or is owned by. Where's the maintenance come from? In this case, it's the DOT. You can see the accounts that we have there. So what we really want to do is be able to quickly drill down to an asset. All this data is now integrated into the system. We have the details of the assets. Now if I click here, we can see this asset's maintenance schedule very, very easily. Notice to the right, we have 3 that are pending. All these are on schedule. These could be concerns. And by the way, when the status changes from on schedule to pending or overdue, email alerts are generated and sent to the proper people and escalated in proper fashion. Do we have any work orders? Here's all the work orders that we may have associated with that. Is it expensed? When I say expenses, who's paying for it? Was it paid? Was it not paid? Any warranties? What's the registration of this asset? So you can see it's pending expiration. We have 36 days for that registration to be renewed. What's the insurance coverage? So again, it is active. Any incidents? Any expense accounts, meters, notes, and attachments that you can see here? They've attached insurance card, DMV passenger registration, so we can easily pull those up very, very easily. Now, here's the vehicle information. You can maintain and manage as much information as you like or as little information as you like. It's really dependent on you. This page can be designed to look and feel what we call page layout, to look and feel what our customers need it to look and feel. So we manage hundreds of pieces of data about the asset. An important piece is the performance metrics, as well as any financial information. When it was purchased, what's the purchase value, what's the useful life, other very financially driven information, depreciation, disposal information. If we go back to performance metrics, we can also see things: trips per hour, average trip per distance, collisions per 100,000 miles per hour, 100,000 miles. These are metrics that this organization is very that wants to understand. Insert any image associated with that. Again, here's all the maintenance schedules, so they know when they do their fire extinguisher server, when they do the tire rotation, when they have to do it, every 5,000 miles or every 12 months. Annual safety inspection is done every 12 months. The next one's due 4/16/2018. It is on schedule. So you can see maintaining any and everything about that asset's very, very easy. So if I wanted to look at the insurance coverage, click on it. There we go. This is the insurance related from all the insurance information. Very easy to see. Now, before okay, question.
Hey, Tim, we have a couple questions from the group. I thought it would be a good sort of pausing point here. One of the first questions is from a member of our group is it looks like we're spending a lot of time sort of discussing asset management in the sense of vehicles. What is the applicability of this type of a program for, say, an organization that's running rail or managing facilities? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely, that's a very, very good question. So let's take an example of this is a larger system that has vehicles, has facilities, has system, has equipment, has actually also has fixed guideway. So based on the asset, so now if I were to create a new asset, so for instance, so notice here, what this allows us to do is create a new asset, what we call record type. So if I were to create a new facility, hit next, it's going to walk me through the data I need to create for that facility. So in this case, what's the asset class, what's asset code, category. Facility assets would have different attribute data associated with it, such as square footage, parking lot information. It has components like HVAC assets, electrical, and other things that we call components that make up the asset. So the system has been designed. In this case, if we look at assets by category, this particular system manages all their vehicles in our system, manages all their systems, all their stations, bus stops, as well as stations, as well as facilities. So it's very easy to, by using the same asset object. So if I go here, I wanted to see, let's say I just want to see all my vehicles, I can say, here's all my vehicles for this organization. So you can see all the basic relevant information. But now what if I just wanted to see my facilities? I can easily click on all my facilities. And now we're going to start to see things like buildings, property information, pavement. There's a bus simulation building. If I click on it and drill down to it, we'll start to see the asset classification, what type is the structure. All the other information about that facility we maintain here. We can classify it. We can identify it, give it the proper information. We can give it the grant number that it was purchased from, any financial information, any calculated fields in terms of when does it need to be replaced. So in this case, the replacement date for this building is 6/19/2054. Remaining useful life is 443 months. It's 81% of its useful life. The term rating for this facility is 4.55. So that's the condition rating of this facility, and that is also one of the requirements for the performance management for facilities is a function of condition using the term model, and this is the term model being used right here. Any depreciation information. So what you'll start to see based on the asset class or the type of asset it is, we'll have different information and different fields of information you can manage about that asset. Okay, so any inspections, so you could have inspection work orders to the asset. You could have different condition assessments to the asset. again, if it's a vehicle, a facility, a rolling stock, or I'm sorry, systems, equipment, stations, all that can be managed in one single container within this application. Now, and even here, if you look here, we'll start to look at whatever systems or equipment. Here's some facilities here that if we want to drill down to the facility, we'll start to see other information associated with that you would not necessarily see on a vehicle record, for instance, equipment type, machine ID, whatever it may be. So again, anything related to a vehicle, facility, a piece of equipment can be maintained and managed in our system very easily. Okay, and also then that kind of takes me to, if we start looking at, I'm sorry, let me look at, if we start looking at the asset class. So I kind of skipped over this. This is actually really, really important. So there's concept of asset classes. Now FTA has helped us by identifying those asset classes through their reporting module. The AIM reporting module actually defines the asset classes for vehicles, infrastructure, facilities, and equipment. Okay, so now if we start looking at defining the asset class, so these are all the vehicle asset classes that we're looking at here. But if I were to drill down and look at the bus asset class, useful life benchmark of 14, this is the number of assets we have in this particular class. 15 are past useful life, 2% are past useful life. This is the class age. If I drill down to this asset class, we'll start to see not only the related performance measurement information you need for FTA, such as past useful life, average age, average rating, class age, as well as any performance measures associated with that, and any assets that are associated with that asset class. You can easily get that information. So if I click on this, these are all the assets that are part of the bus asset class that we have to report on per FTA. Just giving you an idea, if we, I don't know if I have that up yet, but if I were to give an example of an export, this is kind of the export. This is the, these are the asset classes for the various, and the performance measures for various infrastructure, service vehicles, and facilities. So you can see this information is these are the asset classes, this is the performance target, and here's the related information associated with that. So if we also start to discuss not just the asset classes, but the assets as well, we can also start defining things like the work orders associated with them, the inspections. If I click back to this guy, let me go back to my asset. So again, we have all our assets. And by the way, this is simply your asset inventory of every asset that you own, operate, what type it is. Is it a vehicle? Is it a facility? Is it a piece of equipment? This is simply the entire asset inventory that I can get to very, very quickly. So again, if I want to drill down to an asset, I could easily drill down to it. If I also wanted to define certain maintenance schedules about my assets or asset classes, I could easily define maintenance schedules. In this case, if I want to see any maintenance that's pending or overdue, I could easily see that as well. So click on that. We'll start to see our maintenance schedules that are, in this case, overdue, that are pending. ADA wheelchair ramp service, tire rotation, whatever it may be. Now, this organization's using our solutions for parts inventory and work order management, but what that generates is that if we have all the work order and the labor and the related information in your asset management program, we start to truly get a total cost of ownership of that asset in terms of how much you're spending to maintain it, what is its a replacement priority in terms of is it more cost effective to actually just replace it than to continue to maintain it. But we have a ton of data about the cost of ownership for your assets in the system. Okay. We also have all the work order components. So if we want to generate a work order, we can easily generate a work order, associate that with the asset. Again, if I want to see all my work orders that are let's say not completed this fiscal year, or let's do a different one. Not paid, whatever it may be. That's not a good one. So here's one. So these are simply work orders that I want to find information about. But if I click on it, we can see that it's also associated with that asset. So everything's related. You can see this is an oil change. This is when it's due. It's completed. It's held for clarification. If I click on the asset name, we're simply going back to the asset started with it. So again, everything starts with the asset, and everything starts with what's its condition, what's its asset class, what's its performance measures, and then the other related things associated with that asset, such as work orders, what group does it belong to if you have asset groups, where is that asset located? So if you have assets spread out across the state, spread across the region, or even spread out across your service area, we may want to know that these are all of our locations where we have our assets housed. Either it could be a facility, it could be a piece of equipment, it could be vehicles, of course. So if I were to drill down to this particular location, we'll see this is location, this is the garage, geolocation, the map of where that's located, and the assets that are located at this particular facility. So you could have assets that are part of a building, a part of a warehouse, part of a, you name it, that can be easily integrated into the solution. Okay, so any reports and dashboards, before I leave this, what I do want to mention is that the asset classification is a function of how FTA recommends we classify assets using the TERM model. So we support that natively. For our, what we call our condition assessment rating, is using TERM as well for assigning a 5-to-1 value to that asset based on its age and condition. The performance measures and the useful life benchmarks are also been standardized and set up in our system so that when you get started, all this stuff is ready to be deployed. Simply need to import your assets and suck them into the system, if you will. Let's talk about before we leave locations. One thing I do want to mention is there are other components a little bit more detail that we could discuss, such as we have what we call a compliance app. The compliance app allows us to manage things like certification, insurance, incidents, insurance policies, and registration. So it goes a little bit deeper. We also can scale up to what we call budgeting. Budgeting is simply where we manage our grants. In this case, here's all the grants that we currently have. This is, if I look at this grant, we can see information about the grant, the detail, the finance, funds used, any activity line items associated with that. What this allows us to do is associate assets with the grant and then debit or understand how much is left within the grant. I'm going to well, it's great. Dan just brought attention. Can I explain performance standards? The performance standards, as defined by FTA, is really, when we look at, if I go back to this guy here, it's kind of performance management. So the measures that have the performance measures at a minimum that have been put in place include these: rolling stock, facilities, infrastructure, and equipment. Now, the performance measures of how you measure those are is really left that the decision of what your measures are or what your targets are is left to the local agency or the group plan sponsor. So you could have a target that so you could have a performance measure. Let's say for your vehicles, your performance measure is percentage of revenue vehicles within an asset that that have not exceed their useful life benchmark. That is the measure. But let's say, what is your target? Your target could be 80%, which means 80% of your revenue vehicles are going to be within their useful life. That means only 20% can fall out, can be past useful life or past the useful life benchmark. Okay, and I will say this concept of useful life benchmark is different than useful life of the asset. So, for instance, if a 40-foot bus, say diesel bus, Gillig, as an example, the useful life that per the manufacturer is 12 years or 500,000 miles, whichever comes first. The useful life benchmarks per FTA would say that's the useful life of that asset is 14 years if you use the out-of-the-box useful life benchmarks. Now, the useful life benchmark, which is the ULB, which is critical, is defined at the local agency, and that can be, it cannot be less than the useful life of the asset per the manufacturer, but it can be greater, and that's a decision that's made at the local level. But it also has to be part of your plan and, you know, kind of justified in terms of how you arrived at your useful life benchmark. Oh, that's another good question. What useful life benchmark is used for, performance measures used for service vehicles or non-revenue vehicles? Now, that's interesting because you see this equipment, that one thing that was done relatively recently within the within FAST before it was finalized was non-revenue vehicles used to fall under rolling stock, and when MAP 21 first came out and the asset classification model came out, they moved non-revenue vehicles or service vehicles into equipment. So service vehicles are and any equipment over $1,500 of $5,000. Yeah, I would get those confused. Are required in the equipment asset class. So if you have non-revenue vehicles or your service vehicles, your useful life benchmark will be very similar to what the useful life of the vehicle is, a piece of equipment. So if it's say a Ford a sedan, the useful life would be of that asset that vehicle is 4 years. Your useful life benchmark may be 5 years or 6 years. But again, that's kind of a function of the local agency and how long they actually run their vehicles past useful life. Most folks I speak with, or at least in the maintenance world, would say that age is fine, but most vehicles hit their odometer useful life well before the age, if that makes sense. Yeah. So if you have equipment, so you could have equipment. The question is kind of, what about equipment that you have that's attached to, say, to a vehicle? Well, that piece of equipment, let's say you have a $100,000 peripheral or piece of equipment attached to a bus. Well, that asset be managed as equipment, but it would also be associated with the vehicle as what we call a component. So a vehicle can have multiple components associated with it. It could be, you could have a bike rack, you could have a radio equipment, which is actually an important piece. The CAT AVL equipment's a part of that equipment if it meets a threshold. So a vehicle could have multiple pieces of equipment attached to it, and the vehicle falls in the asset class of rolling stock, but the equipment attached to it would fall into the asset class of equipment, and the performance measures and the performance targets and the ULBs would apply to those as they need to, if that makes sense.
So what about non-attached vehicle equipment? So, for example, like a bus wash.
That would fall under equipment, under asset class, and you'd manage the same information that you know. When did you buy it? What's the purchase date? Was the what's the replacement value? Useful life? That information would simply be managed as that equipment class or record type. But it's all going to be in one single integrated container, so that at the end of the day, what you guys want to be able to do, what we all want to do, is be able to go to get our dashboards, our reports, and say, what is my capital replacement analysis? So show me what's my replacement estimate by asset classes, what's my asset inventory by type, what's in this case is in service, out of service, contingency, waiting disposal. What is now my state of good repair for this region based on the FTA term model? So you can see here, this is almost 57% of the regional assets in this community are past useful life or poor on the FTA term model. So just hover over that, you can see not a lot of excellent and not a lot of good. So what that means is that there's going to be some replacement funds that need to be prioritized over the next 5, 10, 15 years. So now we can also see it by category. Here's all my facilities, all my stations, systems, and vehicles. Now, if we want to also see a different flavor of a dashboard, we could see my KPI dashboard. Here's my 5-year replacement plan. I need to come up with $68 million. Here's my maintenance cost trends over the past few years. Here's my condition grades, excellent, kind of looking at it a little bit differently. And then here's my regional state of good repair. So when we mentioned that if you have a group plan or a state or a region, your grantees or your participants can roll up to the parent account, and then we can drill down to compare them and also analyze by our performance measures and performance management. If we believe the data in the system for this particular organization, we have, if we were to replace all of our assets and facilities and systems and equipment over the next 10 years that are past useful life or in the state of good repair, it'd be $143 million we have to find over the next 10 years, which obviously probably won't happen. Now, reports are very, very important. So there's tons of reports that we can easily say, show me my inventory, my vehicle inventory summary. Well, this is simply a list of all my vehicles by grantee, who's in service, what's contingency, what's awaiting disposal. But it gives us a very good understanding of what we have from an inventory at a regional, or if you're a state, it could be a state level. We have replacement priorities. I have my facility inventory summary. So in this case, we can start to see buildings and the equipment associated with those buildings. So the maintenance building, it may have other things associated or installed in it that we need to roll up to that building. In this case, there's 156 buildings, but there's 616 pieces of equipment that are installed or within those buildings that we need to be able to maintain, manage, and inspect via inspection work orders, safety work orders, or what you would have. Okay. So the really easy to get to data, really easy to calculate your state of good repair, as well as do more complex things like work order analysis. Your inspection programs can be set up in the system. If we had more time, we'd kind of demonstrate the mobile app for field service and inspections of going out in the field, pulling up the asset, taking a picture of the asset, taking a video of the asset if you like, capturing the geolocation of the asset so we can map it, uploading that to the system, giving it a condition rating. All that can be done out in the field using ThingTech Mobile or ThingTech mobile apps that connect back to the enterprise asset management system. I can easily edit these reports. I can subscribe to these reports. If I wanted to modify the filters, I'd simply edit, and then I can put my own filters on this and save it out. So replacement data equals this. If I want to drag and drop more data on it, I can easily drag and drop more data on it. That's the funding source. So it's very easy to build new reports, new dashboards, save them out as your custom reports, whatever it may be. Very easy to cut and dice the data to get to the information that you guys need to get to. So I'm going to leave it. A few minutes open for questions and answers. I know I rattled on and spoke very quickly, but what I want to summarize is is the system that we're demonstrating can be very, very simple, a simple inventory with condition, asset classes, and your KPIs and performance measures to meet the minimum requirements of FTA's NTD program. Or you can scale it up to be much more complex based on your size and maturity in terms of where you're at with your asset management programs. If you wanted to automate and get more visibility into your maintenance and your parts and inventory program, you can easily do that. So if you wanted to put technology for scanning parts or QR codes or even RFID on your parts and inventory, we support technologies like that. So it's really a function of where you are in your asset management life cycle, organizational life cycle of where do you want to get started and how do you want to scale up as you need to or as your business dictates that you need to. So I just wanted to throw that out, Dan, before we went to any other questions or comments.
Thanks so much, Tim. We do have a couple questions from the group. The first one is, talk about how easy it is. Let's say we have an organization that already has existing asset data, maybe in a spreadsheet, maybe in another system. What's the capability of ThingTech to import that data? How easy is that?
That's a great question. It's very, very easy. We have what we call a bulk data loader or a data import wizard that allows us to map your data or other systems' data. Let's say it's a spreadsheet or Access database, whatever it may be. We can map that data very quickly and very easily. And once we map it, that data just is imported within a few minutes into our system. So that's a very, very easy process. We also have what's called an API, or we also can connect to other third parties through these things called APIs or application programming interfaces. These are simply things that allow databases and software applications to talk to each other behind the scenes. So we support multiple third parties like Oracle or SAP or AssetWorks or fueling systems and so forth. So we can also potentially connect to multiple third-party systems and bring data in if we need to. We do that often, by the way, for organizations that have a maintenance, say a fleet maintenance application that they really like. It might be old or outdated, but they really like it. They built processes around it. But we do that often to pull in the work order data so we can get the total cost of ownership of the asset and just replicate the data from the fleet system and then just pull that in our system. But then we can manage all the other assets like facilities, systems, equipment, whatever it may be. So it's very, very easy. For the data import, data conversion process is fairly automated and very, very straightforward from a data mapping and import perspective.
Another quick question here for you, Tim. Could you speak to a little bit about how ThingTech notifies users of things that need attention? So, for example, in a maintenance program, alerting us about an upcoming need or identifying a problem before it becomes new.
Absolutely. So we have a concept in the administrative settings called our workflow editor and alarm rules editor. The workflow editor and the alarm rules editor allows us to build the rules that our customers want to be alerted about. So, for instance, let's say you're concerned about any preventive maintenance work orders and they're not been completed. So you could build a workflow rule that says if the scheduled date is if the date is greater than 7 days greater than the scheduled date of the work order, say preventive maintenance work order, I want the system to do this, and the system could do a few things. It could send an email to your maintenance manager. It can email a supervisor. It can update a record. We actually use the same logic to update our statuses, so it's now past due. So organizations define what do they consider a past due work order. Is it 3 days greater than its due date, or is it 7 days greater than due date? So there's a user interface and wizard built into our system for that, and then you can define what it does and who it gets sent to very, very easily. And it's also done through what we call the business process editor as well, that allows you to define those workflows and rules very, very effectively. and it's configurable at the agency level. So it's not one rule fits all, because nobody operates that way. Any other questions, Dan?
One more question here.
Okay.
How long does it typically take an organization to stand up a tool like this?
It's a function of the size, and it's a function of the source or the quality of the data that you have. Many organizations, especially in transit, tend to have really, really good vehicle data, but sometimes the facility and equipment data is not as great as it could be. But as a rule of thumb for, let's say, a mid-sized organization to stand something up, such as this, is between a 2 to 4 week effort.
All right, we got a couple more questions coming in here. What is the potential for use with GIS technology?
Perfect. We integrate directly into ESRI GIS, as well as we also integrate Google Maps. So the question of GIS integration, we support natively ESRI GIS 10.2 and above, so we can pull data in from your current GIS, or even give you data in an ArcGIS fashion or format. If we support a GeoJSON for the technical people on the file on the call, we give you data back, what's called a GeoJSON file, that can be mapped in almost any system. So between ESRI GIS, and by the way, this is kind of the ESRI component. This is where bulk of their data, the bulk of their data is loaded into our system. So we can start to see things like stations, their linear facilities, and so forth. So this is actually a pretty good example of using GIS data and mapping it with asset data. In this case, we mapped asset data with all their bus stops and all their stations, and amenities on those bus stops and stations to determine where we should locate a potential BRT or light rail extension. So we integrate to GIS and geospatial data very, very well, and we have another product that connects to this that we call real time, and that connects to vehicles and diagnostics in the vehicle and telematics in the vehicle to get location data, all your engine diagnostic data, and brings that back into your maintenance program, so we can do predictive maintenance and on your assets and utilization.
All right, just be mindful of the time here. We do have a couple additional questions, but we're going to go ahead and table those for now. If you did ask a question, we didn't get to it, sincerely apologize. We will follow up with you directly after this meeting. And Tim, you want to kind of give us a quick conclusion and walk through what we discussed today?
Yep, to summarize, hopefully we discussed some of the key components of the final rule for your TAM for Tier 1 and Tier 2, discussed the TAM program and kind of organizational applicability of our application, how it can be deployed in a single organization or in a multi-tenant organization, multiple agencies that roll up to a state or to a region, the compliance requirements. We spend a lot of time on leveraging, really, of course, how technology can be used to model the requirements that FTA is asking from its grantees. So managing all your asset classes, your performance measures, your performance targets, your useful life benchmarks, your asset inventory, your condition of those assets, the investment priorities of those assets, and then the other things that can be integrated into a very robust enterprise asset management solution, such as work orders, parts, mobile apps, and asset analytics. I think we spent a lot of time on that, and we certainly spent a lot of time on our tool, which allows us to really allows our customers to meet 100% of the TAM requirements out of the box. So in terms of further assistance, please contact us. We're here to help. We're here to offer any support services. For those that attended, if you want any free consulting or free review of your data, or even look at your data or import of your data, we'd certainly love to have that discussion and see if we can assist in meeting these aggressive timelines, or these fast approaching timelines. So Dan, that's the wrap up. We'll be following up. Dan, you want to just briefly tell what's going to next steps in terms of can we email are we going to email the PowerPoint or links and all that? So Dan will follow up and give instructions on how to access the materials if you're really bored or have insomnia, and our contact information is located here. Thank you so much for attending. We certainly appreciate it and look forward to future discussions. Everyone have a great day today. Thank you.